I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
And then when you asked me, if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I might have thought, oh, no, I don't really, I don't need to do that. When you asked me, I was like, somebody else, somebody cares.
Hello and welcome to Four Burners. My name is Josh Earl, and joining me today, very special guest, comedian, writer, a riverboat dandy.
Riverboat dandy.
Please welcome, it's Greg Fleet, everyone. Yay.
Yahoo, brother.
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm very happy to be here.
I normally start the show by saying to the listener how long we've kind of known each other. I was thinking it's probably close to 20 years. Wouldn't be 20 years yet. I reckon it was the 2004 Hobart Comedy Festival I first met you.
Was that we met there first?
We met there first because it was the big gala, I'd say, and I moved across to Melbourne that year, so I met you there as well.
And I think you and
the bedroom philosopher
were like the big noise in Hobart. You were the two sort of big.
Yeah, and then the next year Hannah came and started being very noisy around there. Hannah Gadsby.
Did she get a rep there, or did she just come straight here?
No, she did the Hobart Comedy Festival. I'm kind of embarrassed about how I kind of treated her backstage in terms of like going, all right, well, this is the running order, and your time's here, and like you just wait until the person's on. Like, I really mansplained comedy to her.
At least you didn't grab her in passion.
Yeah, but she, I have since apologised about that, and she was
that's
fine.
What
she
you
was,
do.
Yeah,
I mean, that's interesting. You indirectly bring her sexuality into it, because I wonder if you'd feel as bad if it was just a guy or a hetero. Because that's what you do with a new comic, because you go, this is how you do it. You wait here.
But then she went on stage and I saw how amazing she was. I mean, I shouldn't have really baby talked her into this. But
then again, she probably didn't know the basic rules. She might be a genius comedian, but still didn't know the ins and outs.
Because apparently she'd been living in Adelaide, done a gig or two over there, then came down to Hobart for because she's from Tassie and visited family and thought there was the Hobart Comedy Festival. Craig Wellington, a good man, he just got a phone call from her and went, "Yeah, I like how she sounds. Great." And then put her on without seeing her do stand up.
Well,
and then she came over here, and I think after that she did. Yeah. But you, because I'd been a fan from a TV show called Something Hot Before Bed, which was filmed at the Espy.
Something Hot Before
That would have been 96, I'd say, because I was year 10 in high school.
Was that Marty Sheargold and Matt King doing sketches?
Was it New Joke City? Is that what you were called? Yeah. And it was like the one you did a parody of the Things of Stone and Wood song, Happy Birthday Helen, but yours was
Birthday Barry.
That was
which
it.
I wish I could remember the lyrics to it, because it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I remember it being funny because I really liked that song as well.
So did I.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think if you're going to do, you're a musical comic. If you're going to do a parody of a song, it actually helps if you like the song.
Yeah, I agree.
You don't hang shit on it and destroy it. You just use it as a basis, because it was a great song.
And I remember you also did a sketch
Happy Birthday, Barry.
I remember one line was that bloke who says "Oyand."
But I think that was in the real song.
Oh, was it?
In the lift. We got stuck in the lift with that bloke who says "Oyand," and I think it was the footy player who played for Geelong and Melbourne, the full forward.
Oh, Mark Jackson.
Yeah,
Mark Jackson.
Yeah,
great.
I think because he said like "Oyam" or I don't know, but. I don't know. I always imagined the lead singer of Things of Stone and Wood and his partner getting stuck in a lift with Mark Jackson, and that's how I want it to be. If you know the truth, don't ring in and correct me.
But I remember there was I watched that show, and what I liked about that show, Something Hot Before Bed, was there were great comics like yourself, Matt King, Marty Sheargold. Who else was on there?
I can't remember who else was on it.
I remember Marty Sheargold. He did the bit about going to the zoo and laughing.
His one bit of stand up. His hot 4.5, we used to call it.
But then it was also people who weren't very good, and it was good to see someone who like me who wanted to do comedy, didn't know how to do comedy, seeing people not very good at it, going Yeah. I
can do that.
I might be able to do this, yeah.
Oh, that's good. Because I'm trying to remember the basis of that show.
It was just a stand-up show filmed at the Espy.
Was it hosted by one particular person?
No,
they always different.
Linda Gibson host one. I can't remember who. Like there was always different hosts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there'd be some sketches which Craig Wellington was in those sketches, him and John X.
Well, they do sketches on it.
They did little sketches. I shouldn't say little sketches. They did sketches. And then I think that was just to break up the edit and cut it up.
Oh, right, because we did the same. And he obviously my drug taking will come into this clearly at some point. But I remember I was having very much an on again, in the off again, on again system. I was very much on again during the making of that show. And there was one particular episode where, and if you take heroin, you nod off sometimes, which is, just you sit there and you go, you just fall asleep and you go, and you wake up again. You're like, no, I'm fine. and I did it on the show.
Yeah.
And to the point where, and I thought, I think I got away with that, and Marty Sheargold's mother rang up and went, "What's wrong with Greg?" And I just thought, oh my God, like this is like way public now.
Yeah.
This is not something I'm hiding. But I can't remember. But I remember we had some great sketches. There was one set in an art gallery that
I remember that one, and the audience was the painting.
I've used that in a play since then. I think I've used it in 2 plays, that joke.
Yeah.
It's a great joke. That joke being you'd walk around looking at paintings on stage, and you can either have paintings or not. It's up to you.
Yeah.
And then somebody turns around and looks at the audience and goes, "Oh my God, this one's amazing!" So, and what do you call this one? Oh, I call it the audience. Gets a bit of a laugh, and then and the person's walking along, looking at the painting. And you get lots of jokes, and they're like, "Oh, I really love it." You go, I don't know, some of the faces are a bit shit. But then the great joke was, you know what I love about it? And you'd sort of go, no, what? And everyone would be sort of concentrating. The person would be walking around, they go, so no matter where you go in the room, the eyes just seem to follow you. And it's just like, because of course they are.
Yeah.
And it's just such a great joke. So feel free to use it if you want.
Okay, so we're going to talk family, friends, health, career. You choose which one, which the direction we're going in. So you can choose whichever one you talk about first.
So we're going to
we'll talk about all 4, but whatever one you want to get through.
What does it say them again?
Family, health, career, friends.
Okay, family.
All right, family. Okay. Let's talk about family, Greg. I've read your book, so I know about your family.
Yep, and it's there are no, and also as you probably know, but there's nothing you can't ask me. There's nothing I'm going to get hurt or upset by.
Well, let's talk about your family then. So you grew up in Geelong.
Yeah, in America and then Geelong.
Geelong.
America till I was 4.
How many siblings?
2, one older. So she's 2 years older and lives in Mullumbimby.
Yep.
And then one who's 8 years younger. Who I was very close with both of them growing up. I was very close with the one who was 2 years older when we were, much younger. And then when my younger sister was born, once she got to be about 5 or 6, I hung out with her a lot and played with her and so whenever I'd come home from boarding school or whatever, we spent a lot of time together. So up until, she was like 16 or something.
Yep.
We had a really close, relationship. But and I think she was born, I'm pretty sure, and I've talked to her about this, there's no, secret. I think my mother had her trying to get my father to stay. It was one of those things, like you got 2 kids and then why do you have another one 8 years later?
Yeah.
And I think that was, hang on, is she 8 years or 10 years to me? It might be 10 years. No, my older sister is 10 years older and I'm 8. But I think that was what the situation was there. My mother kind of thought maybe that would get him to stick around and wow.
So your parents quite volatile relationship or?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Not physically.
Yep.
Not. There was never any physical violence. No, there wasn't, and I don't know if there was. But a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing, and I remember there's a noise. I don't know if you remember in Peanuts cartoons, whenever the adults would talk, it'd be this like wah 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 wah. That's how it's this weird thing in my mind that it's how I remember my parents talking. It was this squawk noise, and it was, intense fighting, like just because what I didn't know at that age was that my father was fucking heaps of different women, sleeping around, like just not a couple of times, but like, he slept with everyone, and he's quite a sociopath. He slept with all his mates' wives, and I'm not talking ex-wives or, after they've split up, or I'm talking like it didn't matter to him, and like all our neighbours, it was just crazy. Friends of mine from school, their parents. In fact, I was doing when my autobiography, whatever you call it, memoir came out. I was doing Charlie Pickering's show on the ABC. What's that show?
The Weekly?
The Weekly, I think, yeah. And he was interviewing me about it. And the interesting thing was most people were, like if they wanted to talk to me about it, were, attracted to the drugs. And, that was always like, scandalous. It was great because Charlie was really, and I think this is because Charlie comes from a very dysfunctional family. He was, I think the family that adopted him were very functional, but he got adopted. So he was interested in that. So that was great. We were talking about my father and all the weird things that he did. And I was talking about him sleeping around and, the kind of effect that had on because it was hundreds of women, it was a lot. And then while I'm telling this story, I look up and the guy who's holding the boom mic, the guy who's the sound guy on the show, he had slept with that guy's mum.
Oh.
So I was like telling the story and I'm looking at this guy thinking, oh, God, no. But after the show, I went up to him because I knew that he knew.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, was that weird? And he went, no, it's hilarious. So thank God it was, he was fine with it.
You just get a boom dropped on your head.
Exactly.
Someone stormed out.
Exactly. How dare you. But, it was, I knew way too many things about my father's sex life. It was kind of
So what age did you go to boarding school?
I went to that school, which was Geelong Grammar, which is a private school. From the very first moment I went to school, but I was a day student up until Form 2 or Form 1, and then we moved from the junior school campus to the senior school campus, which was further away. But also, as I moved to that campus, my family moved about 60 miles in the other direction. So kind of two things happened at once that put about, 100 miles between.
Yeah.
And so I started boarding then. And it was never one of those things of, like, I was sent to boarding school.
Yeah.
It was actually great because the majority of kids at that school were boarders and you wanted to be in the majority. As you know, with school, you don't want to stand out in any way. So I actually really liked it. And I think also maybe because there'd been so much stress with them arguing and everything at home. Although by the time I went to the boarding school, the big thing had happened.
So the big thing. Well, let's talk about the big thing.
Oh
then.
yeah, but I just thought I won't say so we can build up.
Oh well.
The big thing was after he worked for Ford, and that's why we came to Australia from. We lived in Detroit in Michigan, and we Eminem.
Yeah. That's what people say. Great Fleet, the Australian Eminem.
Yeah. Absolutely. I lived in 4 Mile, which was a bit nicer than 8 Mile. But we moved to Ford in obviously in Detroit, and then Ford in Geelong. Geelong, that's where they used to make Fords. So we moved. He was asked, "Do you want to move?" And I think this is true. My parents, and they're not horrible people or anything like that. They're both dead now, but they weren't horrible people. But I think they were both quite right wing. And Michigan, Detroit especially, the year that we left Detroit, there were huge riots with 1967. With African-American people just going, hey, we've been treated pretty badly for a long time, and they just cut loose. And I think that when my parents were offered the chance to move to Australia, they saw it as a way of getting away from that. Because, they thought, black people are going to get power. That would be terrible. And I'm not positive about this, but I've got a feeling that the idea of Australia where the Indigenous population had been so dehumanised kind of appealed to them. Now, I might be wrong and I might be saying a terrible thing about people that I shouldn't say.
So was that 1967?
Yeah.
So isn't that when we had the referendum here for Indigenous people to actually get the vote?
Yeah.
So your parents would have come in and went,
we just, if we'd been here earlier, we could have voted against it. But so we came to Australia, but then he worked for Ford, slept with everyone's wives and all that kind of stuff, and some people who probably weren't in relationships, and then he went into business for himself, I don't know why he did that. Maybe he got in trouble at work. Maybe, he slept with his boss's partner. I don't know. But he went into business for himself, and that was initially very good, but then it went bad, and he kind of screwed it up, lost it completely. And then everything was going wrong. So, his business had gone wrong. His family life was a nightmare because he's, fighting with his wife all the time. And he everything was wrong. And one day he just took his own life, in that we didn't know this was coming, but he left his car on a pier. He left a note with his solicitor and just said, sorry, can't do it, blah, blah, blah. And he left me, which is so weird, he left me an air rifle, like a gun, which I liked. Yeah. I wanted one, but he left me an air rifle with a note saying, Greg, protect the family. And I was thinking, you're not protecting the family.
Yeah. How old were you?
10.
Oh, so.
Yeah, weird. It was all weird. And, kind of, it was depressing. And that's what I remember more than anything, was this sort of this weight of depression about the whole thing. And everyone was, my sisters were devastated. My mother was devastated. Yeah. There was all these women around who were devastated. And I found out later, a lot of my mother's friends who were devastated because he'd been sleeping with them. Oh. So it was just this nightmare. And so that was sad. And, it took a while for us to even know that had happened. My mother kind of eased us into that. So that's when I went to boarding school. But then a couple of years later, about, 3 years later, somebody saw him walking down the street in Melbourne and went, is that Bill Fleet? And I guess followed him or something, and saw where he worked and told my mum. Oh, no, it must have been, saw him in Frankston. But anyway, it turns out he was working as a real estate agent in Frankston. Now, I might get ready for the joke. I know that, working as a real estate agent in Frankston is like being dead, but it's not exactly the same. So that's what he just pulled a Swiftie. He was amazing. Like,
but also
sociopath.
Didn't move that far away either.
No, although he'd gone all over the place, but then strangely and kind of stupidly came back. And maybe as time went on, you just get comfortable, and I think bank robbers do that too. Everyone, you just start going, I haven't been caught. Probably won't, but he had been to, it's hard to know too because he lied so much, but he told me, and I think this is true, he'd been to South Africa. He had been in the Green Beret, which is an American military thing, kind of like the SAS. Yeah, he'd been in that, and but then when Vietnam started, he kind of faked a breakdown to get out of having to go to a proper war. Yeah, and but then he told me that when he left, he made himself available as a mercenary, which of course would really appeal to his whole James Bond kind of delusional thing, and he went to South Africa. Now I wouldn't be at all surprised to find out that he was working for the whites in South Africa, suppressing black people. It wouldn't surprise me. But I never found out exactly what he was doing there. But he was apparently there. He went to various other places. I think he went back to the States for a little while. He ended up going to Queensland and met a woman, of course, and under a different name. He went under a false name and married her and had a kid. And just was living as a different guy, and then when my mother, and then her father owned a real estate company in Melbourne, and offered him a job, and he took it. I don't know, maybe he was kind of caught out because he could go, oh no, I don't want a job. I'll stay up here in Queensland. I mean, I don't know, but he just thought he wouldn't get seen, and he did, and but then as soon as my mother saw him and walked into his office, which it would have been just horrendous for him.
That's the worst day of work ever.
But he immediately dumped the new family, which is, horrible for them because I knew that feeling. Yeah. But he did that because I think my mother legally, she could do worse stuff to him than the new woman. So, he's only looking after himself. He immediately, kind of threw himself at my mother and convinced her in a strange way to take him back. Yeah. And which she kind of did. But then about a year later, he did it again, although this time he didn't. He actually, I think, told us I don't know, but he wasn't a surprise. It wasn't like, oh, he's dead again.
Yeah. Oh, so he
left again.
He left again.
Yeah. But and then, you know, for the rest of his life, he pretty much lived in the States. He did come back at one stage in 1984. He came back. I don't know what had happened, and I don't know exactly why this was, but I think my mother was willing to have him back again, which is just nuts. He came back, and he was back for about 6 months or so. And when we first came to Australia on the plane on the way over here, he's so charming, and he was handsome and lovely. How they met. They were in first class on the way over here from America, and they met Lindsay Fox and his wife. And they were chatting on the plane, and Lindsay Fox is a very generous man. By the end of the flight, because they said, oh, we're going to find a house in Australia and do this and that, Lindsay Fox just took his keys out of his pocket and said, oh, you can live in this place. It's in, I think it was in Portsea. And they didn't end up doing it, but what a generous thing to do. But he ended up getting a job with Lindsay Fox, you know, all these years later. And Lindsay Fox was, you know, a real working class, one of those guys who pulled himself up by his bootstraps, and he said, all right, well, you know, you can get a job driving a truck, and, you know, you can work your way up. And he would have given him a fast track. But my father was probably too up himself to kind of do that for long. So he kind of, you know, he didn't do that for very long. And, he went back to America, you know, met a couple of different women and rich women. He'd worked out that was the way to go. And that was the same with my mother. She was much better off than he was. Yeah. And just lived the rest of his life with these women. And he was an actor for a while. He did a few different things, but he was strange. He did, you know, he did strange things. When he came back to Australia for a little while, Bob Hawke had just got in.
Yep.
And, you know, Australia went with, even all my, you know, boarding school Liberal voting friends were excited when Bob Hawke got in. Everyone was like, you know, wow, you know, he's got a world record for drinking beer. This is great. But my father said to me, yeah, it's a real shame you're living in this communist country, Greg. And I was just like, oh, you're such a dick.
Yeah.
But, and he died about 5 years ago. Weirdly, my mother and he died he died, and then, no, my mother died, and then about 4 months later he died. But it was a real shame, because I think my mother just desperately wanted to outlive him, and she just missed out. But when he died, I said to Lawrence Mooney, I said, oh, Jesus, Loz, I didn't tell you this, but the other day my father died in America. And Loz went, are you sure? I was like, no, I'm not.
In that, when you're like 10 and it happens and your mum kind of hides it from you, was there anyone you could talk to about it? I guess you talked to your older sister about it, but I
don't think we did.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of so... I remember walking around feeling this grey, heavy kind of, I guess, depression, you know, like just walking around, just the world just seemed... I think it was winter in Victoria, you know, just grim, you know, in the outskirts of Geelong. It was just, it wasn't, no, there wasn't really anyone to talk to about it, I don't think. And I don't think I ever did in hindsight. I don't think we were ever given, you know, these days you'd probably go to a shrink or something, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. The school would go, all right, we better, Yeah,
but there was none of that. And, I mean, you know, there were certain people who made an effort, you know, certain teachers and stuff who made an effort in hindsight to to probably fulfill that role or whatever. But unfortunately, I never got picked by any of those freaky men who pick kids without dads and go, I don't know how to get my next victim.
Did your mum see anyone after? As in, like, did she date people?
Yeah, not for a long time. And then she did. She dated this surfer guy in Torquay, because we lived in Torquay. And he was a guy who'd been one of the original kind of guys who discovered Bell's Beach. And, you know, it was like he was a surfy, and he was a cool guy. Yeah. I can't remember his name. He was nice. And he was a little bit sort of known in the surfing world. But then she dated a doctor who was the doctor in Torquay. And they were always little, which is weird. They were always little guys.
Nothing wrong with little men.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan. But
so after your dad leaves the note saying, take this.
Take the gun.
Look after the family. Did you feel any responsibility to fulfill that role?
No, I don't think so. Okay. I don't think so. I think it was all just too nuts. And I don't think my mother would have she wouldn't have wanted me to have, to take on that.
Yeah.
That's a heavy.
Because my uncle, my grandfather died when he was 39 and my uncle was with him. He was like 11, 12 years old at the time.
Shit. He was with him when he died?
When he died, yeah. They had a heart attack and he said to him, now you're the man of the house now.
As he's dying?
As he's dying. And that
no way,
on a child as well. And I get, look, you're dying. I'm not going to hold him like, oh, you shouldn't have said that. But it's that thing of like the pressure you put on someone like that. But also you're worried about your family. All right, you look after the family now. Also, all the women on my mum's side of the family are the strongest women you'll ever meet. Like my uncle does not need to protect them. It's that thing. Yeah. But it is that thing of like, I think even to this day, like he's in his 60s, like his sisters are in their 60s and 50s, like they don't need protecting, but he still will.
Still feels it.
If anything comes, the family's everything. I'm gonna get in there and protect them, and so it's but
that's interesting.
It's nice it didn't happen to you, and that you felt like didn't have that burden on your shoulder the whole time.
And you asking me that, no one's ever asked me that before. It actually made me go, oh, am I a bit shit?
No,
am I an idiot for not having done
Did you have a role in the family? Like everyone seems to have a role in the family, like someone like lightens the mood or someone.
Yeah, I think
like
you would be that.
You'd
be the
middle child.
Yes, exactly. Middle child.
Thing. Yeah,
be funny.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Keep.
Yeah. All right.
And also, I was the only boy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that does make a difference.
So I got a pretty smooth ride.
Yeah. So I only had boys in my family.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just two brothers.
So was there a lot of fighting?
Between us, yes.
One thing I always thought, later on, I thought I'd be a much better fighter if I'd had brothers.
We did, and we had an unspoken rule: you don't punch people in the face.
Oh, okay.
We never punched it. I punched my younger brother once in the face, and then my older brother let me know you don't punch in the face.
By punching you in the face?
But yeah, not in the face, but yeah. But yeah, there was a lot of fight, and there was also my younger brother was 3 years younger than me, 5 years younger than my older brother, and so that's a bit of an age gap. And just wanted to be involved.
Oh, right,
and my older brother, at certain points, like, I fucking don't want to have a 7-year-old. And one of the greatest moments of our life, my young brother had spent days of his holidays building this Lego creation.
Oh, no.
And he showed it. And he just says to Jason, I bet you won't break it. And Jason's holding a football and went, all right, just threw it. It just explodes. And Mum was like, Brenton, you did say, like you did say, I bet you won't do it. Like, so
you don't dare your teenage brother to do something.
Especially my brother. All right. So we've got friends, career, health. Which one do you want to do
now? Probably health, because I don't think it'll be that interesting. But then again, it could be really interesting.
I think it is interesting. So would you say you're healthy? I'd say you're looking healthy now.
Yeah, I'd say I am, and especially, with a lot of the things that I did and stuff, and the amount of people I know who are dead, which is just phenomenal, and especially recently. Like a friend of mine died today or yesterday. One of the guys who was in the Gadflies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Jonathan Nix, who was the original bass player, which is a shame. But he, not from anything. He was a very healthy guy. He just had a brain tumor or something. So.
Yeah.
But no, I'm actually, I think I'm pretty healthy, and I have and still do go to the doctor fairly regularly. So they've kept I think I've got high cholesterol.
Yep.
But that's it. That's about the only thing. I don't have hepatitis or anything like that, which is amazing because so many people I know did.
Yeah.
And anyone who kind of used any kind of IV drugs in the sort of 70s, 80s into the 90s, you're very fortunate if you don't end up with Hep C from that. I know so many people who, did it once or twice. Like people like Helen Garner, who she said she did it about 4 or 5 times, and she ended up with Hep C. And stacks of people. But I did have it. But there's something like, I think my doctor told me it's like 25% of people clear it from their system.
Okay.
So I was one of the lucky ones, which
is
great. But no, I'm pretty healthy. My sister, my older sister, grew up with severe asthma. So she was literally on her deathbed about probably 7 or 8 times growing up.
Yeah.
Where, that we'd take her to hospital and they'd, I remember them really clearly once, the nurses saying, oh, we moved her bed to under the window because, we don't think she's going to make it through the night. And, she wanted to look out the window and stuff like that. So it was like, wow. But she somehow just smashed through it. And, she still has to take, all kinds of stuff. I don't know what exactly, cortisone and things, but, she had a pump growing up, which I think these days it's probably a lot more simple, but back then, those big electric gadgets you had to breathe in. And
my younger brother had asthma a lot as well. But I think that was more, we lived in a town where there was a pulp mill pumping black smoke into the air.
Oh, that's like classic American.
Yeah. And there was also a paint pigment factory that just pumped out like poison into the ocean. Like you drive in and the ocean would be orange.
Sue or something.
I don't know. Well, he's fine. It's amazing. The pulp mill closed down in like 89, 90. And most kids in that town in Burnie, their asthma kind of got a lot better. Got a lot better.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like the kind of Appalachian, that's Burnie would have been the place that they would have trialled OxyContin.
Absolutely. So it's funny though, because Brenton had bad asthma, whereas Jason and I didn't. But Jason and I were the ones where Mum smoked all throughout her pregnancy with us.
Oh, right.
So we just got used to it.
Yeah, well, see, my mum and dad both smoked their heads off when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I smoked from the age of like 13 up until about 3 years ago when I started vaping.
Yeah.
And so I still vape, but it's so much, my breathing and everything's so much better than it was. But, I was just I was a massive smoker. And, my mother and father both smoked. My mother stopped. I don't know how old she was when she stopped, but, she was always on at me to stop.
Yeah. Your addiction. Mm-hmm. So when did you start using?
Started using heroin in 1982.
Yep.
So I was 20.
Yep. And was it just around at the party? Were you kind of always kind of drawn to it? Not always, but like when you heard it, you thought, I might do that? Or was it that's around, people are doing it, these people seem cool?
I think it was probably like that.
Yeah.
Like that. Because it was a girlfriend I had. But I'd already taken things like speed and LSD. So I was obviously, interested in trying those sort of things. But I do remember once her and her brother, came around to my, we liked each other, she and I, and her and her brother came around to my house and said, we're going to go score. Do you want to come? And I was like, yeah. And I was trying to be cool and everything. But it wasn't until like halfway, we were going from Carlton to St Kilda. It wasn't until we were like halfway there that I realised they meant heroin, not pot.
Yeah.
So I had this kind of awkward, I think I told them, I went, what? Hang on, whoa. and we had this, long conversation, and I remember them saying it's better than, I said, what's it like? And they said, it's better than sex. And I used to say in the show that I did, well, if you mean sex with me, that's a great recommendation, because I wasn't exactly, I wasn't there for a long time in those days. So, yeah, and the other interesting thing was the first couple of times I had it, it was a bit like, oh yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So, but I just kept going until it was fantastic, and then it became impossible to stop.
I mean, it's also especially that era as well in St Kilda was.
It was all,
it
was all the birthday party and the boys next door. And
I was reading about this kind of stuff in music magazines in Tassie, and it being almost romanticised.
Oh, it was totally romanticised.
So with like Nick Cave and all that kind of stuff, and then even in Paul Kelly's A to Z book, he talks about he still uses, but like it's in the book it's like it's under control. I do it once every 6 months or so as a special treat.
Which I believe to be totally true with him. The other thing is that I heard, and I'm sorry, I know Paul, and I also very, very briefly met Nick, but I was friends with other people, in his bands and stuff.
Yep.
But, was that I heard from fairly reliable sources, and this makes really good sense, that both of them were people who had, I was told it was still happening. This was 15 years ago, so, whatever. But that they would use for a while, like, maybe a month or two, and then they'd stop. And when you stop, it's difficult. It's not, it's not impossible. It's not, it's just you feel very shit for, really it's over, and the worst of it's over in a couple of days. But it's tough, especially if you can just go get it, and make it stop. But I was told that they would use for a while and then stop, and you get really emotional when you're coming off it. You get, all this. And I was told that that's when they wrote.
Yep.
They'd do it on purpose, that you'd get in this state, and after the first day or so, where you can hardly do anything except shit yourself and fall over, they'd start writing and get these great bursts of creativity, and so
yeah.
I don't know, I don't know if that's true or not, but I was also told that people used to be really shitty with Nick because Nick used to come back to Melbourne. And, everyone in Melbourne would be like, grim and on heroin and everything. And he'd come back and take heroin with everyone. And then he'd fly back to London and, dry out and, go and everyone in Melbourne would be stuck, still on it. And, so they used to be shitty at him for that. But I was good friends with Roland, who was in his band, who was a lovely guy. And, great musician and smart.
I met Roland. His girlfriend used to work at the Trades Hall behind the bar there.
Oh, really?
He used to drink at the Trades Hall. And my first year doing the comedy festival was at Trades Hall when it was just me, Keating, and another show called The Hells Angels Brought Me Here. And
I remember.
Yeah, it was a good show.
It was about being a bikie, or
yeah, it was about getting. It was a play, so it was like he was locked up in the in like just a cell, but like. The bike, he's locked him up. And then...
Oh, did they?
So it was called...
Because it's based on... There was a song called Angels Brought Me Here.
Yeah, Guy Sebastian. And so their show was called Hells Angels Brought Me Here. And then on the third night, the Hells Angels turned up.
Right.
Yeah, and they were like, you can't call your show this.
Yeah.
And so it ended up being called The Angels Brought Me Here. And, the guy, I forget his name. He's a great guy, but he was like very much... every night going, can you just check if there's anyone out there like who looks a bit menacing? I'm like, no one, because I was doing my show all playing a glockenspiel and all cute.
Cutesy.
Yeah, and then Keating was on in between, but yeah, he was
I'm trying to remember his name.
I think it was like, it wasn't Cliffy, but it was something like that. Yeah.
Oh, well, too.
Anyway,
it was a first name with the Y.
Yeah, but Roland was at the bar and he was drinking there, and it was the thing of like, I don't get starstruck too often.
Yeah.
But seeing him out of context as well. It was like, oh, shit. Like, oh, fuck. Oh.
Yeah.
Because I'd been talking to his girlfriend for like 2 weeks. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, fuck. Now I'm... Anyway, it was a great man, great... And
absolutely.
Great musician.
Great musician and a really decent human being, like he was, of course he was an addict, but I think he was quite moral. He wasn't a crim.
But health though.
Yes, sorry.
Nice, clean now.
Yeah. As I'm so sick of lying about it, and that was the thing. It was, I got so many lies, but yes, clean now, and I won't say I would never do it again, because I think, there could be times when I would, but the interesting thing is now I really have no interest in it. It's not like for the first time ever, I'm not trying not to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh God, no, I couldn't be fucked doing that.
Yeah.
But it's, it cost me a lot, career wise. And then there's all this stuff with, oh God, all this career. I mean, I will get onto it, but all this stuff with Bob and oh God, it really backfired on me, like I always thought, I think I just thought people would forgive me forever.
Well, this is my theory about it. Like with any addiction, it's like in your 20s, that's cool. 30s, oh, okay, this person.
It's a bit weird.
Yeah. 40s, like, oh, wow, okay. 50s, like, oh, that's a problem. And then you go to 60, 70s, like, well, if they're going to do it, like, there's that ship's sailed now. They're going to do it. Like, yeah. But look, not to joke about it.
Yeah,
I didn't live it, but yeah.
You should joke about it. Yeah.
All right. We've got friends and career left. Which one do you want?
Interesting. We'll go friends, and then we'll save career for the end.
Friends. Did you make friends easy as a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Did you have a best friend all through primary school kind of thing? Or were you more of a floater around?
I think I was a bit of a floater, and I think I was also one of those kids who, and even as an adult, and even, probably to this day, I was one of those people that always had a couple of totally different groups of friends that wouldn't get along with each other.
Yep.
And then that probably with the drug taking, that became a really extreme example of that, because, I'd be, friends with artists and, performers and comedians, and there's, and people are always really surprised to hear there's very little or no heroin in the comedy community. People always think there's, when they ask me, I'm going to go, oh yeah, lots of people are in it. But as far as I know, no one is,
No.
And But it's there's this two. So as a kid, definitely, different groups of friends. Like there was always the smart, ambitious, quite often from well-to-do families. Those, I was friends with those kids, but I was also friends with the real troublemakers and the naughty kids, and the kids who smoked and drank and got did naughty things.
Were you a troublemaker?
Yeah, but not. I was a troublemaker, but for some reason, they forgave me. Now, I don't know, maybe it had something to do with my father. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But they, like I had a couple of friends at school who got chucked, who got chucked out and, or, told you won't be coming back next year, and then they didn't, But I always did, I always, I got in trouble, but I always, came back. I got detentions and stuff like that, but maybe, they thought I was smart or, because I wasn't dumb, I wasn't a moron. But, I was, I was forgiven, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I just expected that would happen forever and ever in my life.
Yeah, so you go to NIDA, so you move cities. Did you know anyone in Sydney when you moved there?
No, I don't think I did. In fact, I don't think I'd ever been to Sydney. I may have been there, once with family or something driving through. I think I remember the bridge. But, it's the most significant things that happened after we finished school. I had a year, I went to Perth and I hung around and just, did odd jobs and stuff. But a girlfriend of mine from school died in a car accident. I remember that really clearly. That was like, whoa, the first person I knew who had died, and it was just, I couldn't get my head around it for a long time. And then around that time, I also auditioned for NIDA and surprisingly got in. I wasn't expecting to get in. I was under the impression you had to audition, that everyone had to audition at least once, and they'd say no, and they'd tell you to work on a couple of things, and then you come back the next year, and if you'd worked on those things, they might say yes. So because of that, I was very relaxed about it, and I was really cool about it. So had I thought I had a chance, I would have fucked it up for sure and been really stiff and wooden. So got in there, and that was great. But unfortunately, 6 months before that, I'd started using heroin. So I got into that. I'd stopped using heroin by the time it started, and my girlfriend and I moved to Sydney. She was the girlfriend I'd started using with. And after being in Sydney for a little while, we started again. And then we never stopped. And it was, I was obviously, not obviously, but I was the only person there who was doing that. And it was a real shame. I blew it. I really blew that opportunity, and it was a great opportunity. And, some incredible teachers, and I learned a lot, just in the 1 year that I was there.
Yeah.
But, they were quite, it was kind of hideous because they were heartbroken that they sort of had to let me go. And I could see it in their, I could see it in the way I felt guilty. I felt like apologising to them, but it was the first time I think it was the first thing I'd ever really blown that I went, oh, this is bad.
Yeah.
I remember leaving NIDA that day on my motorbike that I had, a little tiny, scooter thing, and riding back to meet up with my girlfriend and take heroin because it's a painkiller and it would take away that pain. But just thinking, oh, this isn't good, And I guess I just thought it'd be all right, that somehow it'd all work out, and it didn't.
Yeah.
But then after that, I started just getting work as an actor, and did a couple of years of that, and working as an actor and working in as a waiter and stuff.
Yeah.
And then after a couple of years or a few years, started stand up.
Yep. So you mentioned Bob before, and so we were talking about Friends. So for those, Bob Franklin did a show based on you. It wasn't very complimentary at all. I didn't see it.
No, I didn't.
But how was that dealing with a friendship breakup, but also it being a one-sided publicly kind of his view.
It was hideous. I didn't realise how seriously people would take it.
Yep.
People, I mean, I think a lot of people sided with him and went, okay, yeah, fuck Fleet, fuck him. What it was about was Bob had been going out with Ros Hammond for a number of years, and she rang me up one day out of the blue, and they'd read my book. They'd both read my book, and they both loved it. And he sent me, ironically, he sent me an email that I still have, which is one of the most complimentary things I've ever read.
Yeah.
And then about a week later, it was so different. But she and I started seeing each other. She basically said, all right, things with him are over, and, it's all gone to hell. And so we started seeing each other, and then we moved in together. And he didn't like it. But I thought, oh, well, that's fair enough. It's happened to me before. It happened to me with Janie and Matt King.
Yeah.
I thought that's just what happens. But then he went around, we lived together for that year, and we moved to Perth, and, spent a lot of time away from Melbourne. But he went around saying to people, if you hire Greg Fleet, I won't work for you, which was pretty extreme. And he did that all over the place, and a lot of people took him up on it.
Yeah.
One of the only people there was a couple, Mooney stood by me, and Tony Martin, surprisingly. Tony Martin, I think, because it had happened to him once before with a relationship he was in, where he just said, what the fuck, are we high school children? What are we doing? It's no one's business who you're romantically involved with.
Yeah.
And so thankfully Tony was and continues to be supportive of me in that. But that also cost him then. He was persona non grata to a lot of people because he'd chosen to side with me. So, and then Bob, weirdly, it was maybe a year and a half or 2 years later, Ros and I broke up. And so, I thought, oh, well, that's that. That's all over now.
Yeah.
And then he did the show. He did a show that he'd been writing, obviously, for a long time. And it was just, I didn't see it, but I asked somebody what it was like, and they said it was like watching a really cute possum get run over repeatedly. And he just did this show about just what an absolute hideous, ironically, he never once mentioned the fact that I was going out with his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
He just said I was an asshole and just went to town about how hideous I am and how bad I am to women and what a bad person I am and what a liar I am, and just went to town. And I've never publicly said one negative thing about Bob, and I pride myself on that because I actually really like him. And I've always really liked his work. I always liked what he did. And I always liked him as a person. And I also understand him, kind of not liking me if I went out with his ex-girlfriend. But, it wasn't a case of me stealing her away from him. That was the other thing. He talked about it when he did talk about it in terms of, that I stole his girlfriend. And it's funny that, he said, I treat women badly. Because talking about it like that, it's like, Ros has no say in it. It's like she's this a princess in a tower waiting to see which of the men is going to win and end up with her.
And if anyone who's met Ros, she is absolutely not that.
Not that at all. But I think they're friends again now. I don't know because she, for some reason, stopped talking to me because I treat women so badly. So that was really harsh. And I always assumed that comedy was just my sort of fiefdom, that I could do whatever I wanted and, that everyone would always like me. And it changed, the combination of that and taking drugs, I guess, and lying and
in the book you talk about, you get over the addiction, but because you've been lying for so long, it's hard to break the habit of the lying as well.
Yeah, I remember that. That's not a thing anymore. But I do remember that it was really hard to give up the lying.
Yeah.
I'd lie about stuff that had no reason to lie about.
Yeah.
Wasn't even benefiting from it.
Yeah. And also, you're a very charismatic man as well. So
I hope so.
I would say that also, can get you out of a lot of stuff as well when you're young and
when it stops, it really stops.
Yeah, I won't say the comic, but there was a comic I'm friends with, and he had stopped doing it for like 10 years and then came back to it, and he was no longer young and charming. He was now in that era of like, oh, this could be a creepy dad kind of like, and he's trying to do the same bits that used to work, and it doesn't work. Yeah. Once the charm goes, it's very hard to get it back.
That's what I used to say to people, because I've had similar experiences with people that I know, and I've always said to people, never stop. Yeah. Because that's the other thing is once you stop, I had friends who, and they don't do it anymore, so it doesn't matter if I say their names, but I won't. But I can think of two or three or four people who did it, stopped for a while, like it took a year or two off to write a book or do whatever, and came back, and it just wasn't the same. And not only men, one's a woman, the others are men, but just didn't. They kind of looked like a kangaroo in the headlights of a car on stage. They look confused, like, but when I've done this before, it really works. And it's hideous to watch. It's almost like, oh my God.
It's like those men who had that one jacket that when they used to wear in their 20s used to go well from them. They used to pick up at it. It doesn't quite fit anymore.
It's really strange, isn't it? That thing of comedy, like it becomes, I'd say if you are going to stop and start again, like just ditch all your material, start again, write new stuff based on where you are in your life now, because it doesn't work.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I normally ask is, have you had any friend breakups? Was it just a slow ghosting, or was there an incident? But I think we've covered that with the Bob.
Yeah. But it's an interesting thing, because with comedy, and this is something that I've learned through this period of time, and it's not all just because of Bob, there's all sorts of stuff involved, but because I also chose to go away with Roz to Perth for a long time, and I was away, I was out of things for a while, and then, life just sort of goes on without you. And people, because comedy is, it's about ambition, and it's about your career and moving forward and all that kind of stuff. People don't, sit around and worry about you and go, all right, we've got to, get Fleety back on track and get everything. I mean, maybe if you were, about to die or something, they would, but everyone just gets on with their life. And so it's often hard to work out who are your friends and who are just people you work with. Yeah. Because what is a friend? How does that actually, there are people in comedy that I kind of thought were my friends that I realised later weren't, and they probably realised the same thing about me. That they're just people you work with, and they're, it's a different thing. But there are people, like I said, like Lawrence and Tony Martin and people, and I've got a lot of friends who are women. Strangely, I don't know why that's strange, because of the way I treat them.
I think if you, when I look at I asked this of Marique when she was on. I said, how many people do you reckon you'd drive to the airport if they asked? To how many people you'd be willing to ask, can you drive me to the airport? And I think we're all like, oh, I'd drive more people than I'd ask people. And so sometimes I feel when people need help, we don't ask for the help from the people who probably would help us if we asked.
See, I reckon, I don't know what this says about me as a person, but I think I would ask more people than I would offer.
You would offer?
But then again, I don't really drive.
No.
I mean, I can, but I let my license expire, and I'm not renowned for driving. Yeah. But that's an interesting thing. I love Marique. She's a great person.
Fantastic.
She did a great thing for me. She wrote a part for me in a TV show. Oh. And then I, used enough heroin to make it really difficult.
Oh. Career. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
So, comedian, author, actor.
Riverboat dandy. Yeah, it's good. It's good to be, when you sometimes, it's easy to think, oh God, it's, nothing's working, everything's going nowhere. And I know you've had moments in your career. I remember this actor I worked with on Flying Doctors once. He was a kind of established actor, saying, and I've stolen this from him a lot. He said, well, when I look back at my what I laughingly refer to as my career, and I just always loved that. What I laughingly refer to as my career. But I know you've had moments, where you've found it almost unbearable, and it's just piled up, and I've had the same. Yeah. But if you actually, sometimes you stop and look at what you've done and actually you look at it and you go, I've actually done a lot.
Yeah.
I've actually got nothing, and if I made an effort, I could, do whatever. It's nothing's over, nothing's finished, and quite often it's, things don't happen because I'm so used to just waiting for things to happen instead of trying to make them happen.
Is that why you started stand-up as well? Because it was like a way to get on stage and make it happen?
I guess. I mean, it was, I was, acting already, and I was doing theatre sports, and through doing theatre sports, I met all these comedians, and I'd never seen stand-up, but they kept saying to me I should do it, and so I eventually did, and was astounded how easy it was. Like, not easy, but it was so much better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be hell, and there'd be people just screaming at me, "You're terrible, get off, you're a failure, and your dad didn't love you."
And you've been doing it in the wave, so the Prince Pat SB days where it seemed to be like, well, listening to people talk about it was like this kind of boom in Melbourne. And then in the mid-90s to even mid-2000s, it kind of, there wasn't that many gigs in Melbourne that were available. How do you, like, were there any moments in that where you're like, oh, comedy's gone now, or was it you constantly working?
I think I always realised that it would stop somewhere and it'd start somewhere else. So like usually, if it was dying here, it'd be kicking off in Sydney, or it'd be, or there was always London was huge, So, and I was usually going over to the UK every year for a while because I was doing Edinburgh, and so I'd do a bit over there. So it always seemed like there was something happening, but it was kind of an accident for me. It wasn't something I particularly wanted to do. It was like, friends said I should do it. So I tried it and went, oh, this is pretty good. And then I started getting paid and I went, well, this is better than being a waiter.
Yeah.
So, it just accidentally kind of became what I did. And it wasn't, I was never like, I want to be the greatest stand-up in the world. And in hindsight, I was never actually a stand-up. I was kind of a storyteller.
Yeah.
And, I look at stand-up, and that's why I don't really like doing stand-up rooms anymore. I prefer doing my own thing in a room anyway. Like, just hopefully I'm going to start doing my own nights.
Yep.
And, I'll tie the podcast into that, but start doing my own nights where people come along and I'll have guests on, sometimes they'll be comedians, but more often not, they'll probably be musicians or sportsmen or politicians or, just interesting people, because I'm more interested in things that are interesting than things that are hilarious.
Yeah. This podcast. Yeah. What was the other thing? So did you, when you started out, how people talk about 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 20-year plan, was there a dream that what you wanted to be?
Not really, no. I remember thinking, I'll keep doing this until one year is not as good as the last year, because every year seemed to get better.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I was to be honest, I'd have to say in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of years that were not better than, but, there was the first time going overseas, the first time, doing Edinburgh, first time like winning an award or getting nominated for an award, or, all these things, meeting, working with celebrities. I remember we did, a gig in London that Stephen Fry hosted, it's just stuff like that where you're just like, this is crazy, I never intended for this to happen. And it's just rolling, getting to all these amazing things. And so, it was always just, it was really, I always felt really fortunate to be doing it. And I always wanted to act as well.
With that, when you're like, so it peaks and then drops off, what's the motivation once it's, because I've experienced the same thing. Yeah. It's kind of like I've had festival runs where it's been 250 people every night for like a month and then whatever it is.
Yeah, well, it's hard
afterwards.
That's why, it's always hard after a festival because you get used to working every night, which you don't do the rest of the year.
No.
And also you get used to working every night to lots of people.
Yeah.
So and they're all there to see you.
Yeah.
The rest of the year you may do gigs where people go, oh fuck, it's you.
Yeah.
Whereas in the festival they're going, oh great, it's you.
Yeah.
But and also, you hosted a TV show. So in a really weird way, I mean, I think I remember while you were doing that, me even thinking, shit, there's only down from here. Because, that's true.
Yeah.
Unless you continue to do that, which is hard to do, you're going to have to get used to going down and up and down and up.
Yeah. So, look, for me, it's putting my ego aside and being motivated by the actual work of what and that's where I'm at in this position.
That's great. And I mean, you've got I can honestly say people that I know who, some of whom don't even know you, you've got a very good reputation as I mean, you're funny, of course, but also just as, your motivations and your, people seem to really admire your work ethic and that you're always coming up with a new idea or an interesting thing, and I think people really like that. So
thanks.
My friend Judy is a big fan of yours.
Thank you, Judy. All right, so that's the end.
Okay.
Now what we're going to do now is you tell me which ones you're keeping on or which ones you're turning off. So out of family, health, friends, career, which ones right now? Today's date is the 20th of December. Tomorrow I'll do a tweet about Paul Kelly's song, How to Make Gravy. But right now, Greg Fleet, 20th of December, which ones are you keeping on?
Well, I didn't talk about relationship as in I'm in a relationship now, and we also work together, which is great. She's a filmmaker. So I would certainly keep work, but it's hard because I'd sort of include her. So would that be friendship?
I'd say friendships, yeah. We'll just go friendship, relationships.
Those two. And so what am I living at? Health
and family.
Yeah. Sorry, family. And
but they might, you don't need to concentrate on family. They might be fine on their own.
Yeah, and I think health is, my girlfriend is worried about how much sugary drinks I drink. And I mean, I understand, and I go, I'll keep a lid on that. But I kind of think, well, if that's the worst, that's pretty good for the Fleet man. I'm worried about Fleety. Why? He had a can of Coke. He had a kilo of Coke last year.
Hey, thanks so much for doing this. It's actually been amazing.
Thank you for having me. Like, I was getting to a point, I think I told you this before the show. I was like, he said, would you mind coming in and doing this podcast? I had to stop myself from going, somebody cares. Somebody wants to ask me something. So, no, I'm really happy to do it.
You mentioned before for this podcast, you're about to launch your own podcast.
I hope so, yeah. I want to do one about addiction.
Yep.
And because obviously I know about it, but have a different guest on each week who has been either an addict or, I know this doctor who's one of the, an addiction specialist. Yep. I know some cops who'd be really good to have on, talking about what it's like for them, whether they want to, arrest these people or not, and all that kind of stuff, legalisation issues, but also not just drugs and alcohol, but, plastic surgery, people who are addicted to games. We were talking about people who are our children
on YouTube.
Yeah. And all the different things that people are addicted to these days. It's phenomenal. Some of them you can't even imagine, if you just Google addictions and start looking at, all the different, I suddenly went, God, I could have a different person every week for a year.
Yeah.
Easily a different addiction.
Yeah.
There's be at least 50.
Great. Also, Greg's got a bunch of books out. So The Good Son is your novel. You've got what's the memoir?
That's called These Things Happen. I think it's hard to get that as a hardback. Well, you can get it as, what do you call it, an ebook.
Ebook.
That's easy to get. And we're making a film out of The Good Son.
Oh, great.
And I've got working on another book, which I haven't got a name for yet, and I think it's going to be called It Used to Be a Bookshop, but that's a weird name. But and also, my partner and I, Philippa Bateman, we're working on 2 film ideas. So hopefully that's going to be what I do, is write films and books.
Brilliant. Thank you for doing this. Hey, thanks everyone for downloading this episode or watching it on YouTube. Hey, if you're in Melbourne, tickets.
That's right. I keep forgetting we were visible. I wonder if did I pick my nose or anything?
No.
Okay, good. You would have warned me.
I'll edit that out anyway if you did. Tickets are on sale for my comedy festival show for next year. The show is called 4 Burners, where I'll talk about my own 4 burners. No guest. It will be funny. There'll be lots of jokes in it. Don't worry, I've been writing it. And so tickets are on sale. Go to joshua.com.au for all the details. Thank you, Greg.
You're doing it at a different venue?
I'm doing it at Tasma Terrace. So
which is in East Melbourne.
It's in East Melbourne, just opposite Parliament Station there. So it's nice.
That's hardly East Melbourne. That's just Melbourne, really.
It's Melbourne. And it's a nice little, so the venue is a heritage listed venue and it's a very nice little room. So you'll feel very special walking in.
It's a great, it was the first place I lived out of school was in East Melbourne.
Oh, cool.
I loved it.
Yep. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, gang.
Bye.